Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors and members. This is an update on a piece of work that you will be aware of. We have discussed this before, and the purpose of the update at this stage is to take you through the workings that the team have been doing in considering this issue and present to you the thinking of that team and a recommendation for the way forward. So just to be clear, the City Centre Integration is convening this group, but this group that has been considering Central Wharves is comprised of Auckland Council, Auckland Transport, ATEED, Waterfront Auckland, Ports of Auckland. It is a comprehensive cross-council piece of work that has been considering this, and the consensus of that group is united as to the preferred outcome. So sharing that with you now, perhaps if we could go to the presentation. Rita, if we can. Councillors, just as we move to the presentation, I'd just like you to note that there's a recommendation from myself, and it is different from the recommendations that are in the...
This replaces A and B, Madam Chair?
I'm suggesting it replaces A and B. I've discussed it with the staff, and they actually helped craft it. It picks up on some of the issues that have been raised today. Very comfortable with that. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like people to note that, and we'll move to the recommendation, to the report. Sure.
I'll second, Madam Chair, your recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. So, Madam Chair, some of you will have seen this presentation before, so I'll run through it fairly quickly, and then we can run to answers beyond that if you so desire. So it ain't moving. Rita, can we? Oh no. Can we do it from here? Hang on, we'll just have a quick little intervention.
Technical interrupters.
Just talk and chat amongst yourselves for a moment while we sort this out. Okay, so we have an amendment to that recommendation. Didn't have time to change that on the presentation, but the Deputy Mayor's recommendation is the one that we will put into that place. So why are we talking about this? This is part of the work that the Auckland Plan has been signalling needs to be done. There have been a number of supporting plans that sit under the Auckland Plan. Obviously there's the Unitary Plan, but there are other strategies that are in place, the City Centre Master Plan, the Waterfront Auckland Plan, Auckland Transport's Plan. There are a number of strategies that have informed where City Centre integration have been moving, which is to provide some clarity around the strategies by taking the strategies and putting them into implementation programs. So we're calling those precinct frameworks, and the precinct framework that encapsulated the recognition of the issues around the Central Wharves was the Downtown Precinct Framework. You'll be aware of that. So this Central Wharves strategy is in the context of that precinct work. The Downtown Framework indicated quite clearly that there was a need to consider some of the issues in the Central Wharves area. So the need to balance the growth of ferry, cruise, visitor services, port operations, and the space is very limited. It's congested, and growth is very significant, as you'll see later on in the presentation. There is a need to address it. It's not an option we have. We do need to understand how we're going to deal with that growth. So the outcomes we were seeking were a vision for the Central Wharves. We want to know where we're going, so there's clarity around where we put our future investment, and where also a signal to the cruise industry and other industries as well as to what our intentions will be and in what time frame. We want to be able to work to agreed growth projections and functional requirements. So we want to understand what's going on there, and we want to be clear that we all have one view around what the drivers are for addressing growth and function. We want then to understand how we can best allocate all of those functions across the Central Wharves space. We're going to produce a plan that shows how that works, a timeline that will determine how we can run that out, and then we'll give a understanding of what those next steps might be and how that time frame can play out in terms of the long-term plan and wider planning issues. So the key drivers really were a desire for quality waterfront space, public space. We've talked about this many times, but our front doorstep, the key street to the harbour edge, is not well defined. It's an opportunity we're missing, and time is certainly with us now that we need to start to address that as we've got growth. Ferry services are growing, and there is a need to drive efficiency. I heard somebody this morning talking about the ferry from Bayswater, and it spends longer turning around than it does docking or going where it's going. And that's very much to the heart of the operational aspects of ferry in the future, the need to address just exactly those issues. Consolidation of tourist and charter services, they're currently spread around the waterfront area. The growth of cruise ship visits and of ships, and we'll talk more about that. The growth and change of port operations, and the optimisation of the super yacht facilities and the consolidation of the heritage fleet. So again, important aspects of the downtown waterfront space. So we need more and better quality public space. Ferry patronage, just expanding on the comments we made before, increasing by 50% in the next 10 years. So between 2015 and 2026, there will be a 50% increase in patronage on ferries predicted. Cruise industry, passengers growing from 200,000 to 350,000 people. That, of course, plays out in the number of vessels that are coming, but also the types of vessels that are coming. Tourist services, we want to be able to make it easy for people to enjoy the Gulf, to enjoy their access to the waterfront. And the super yachts, we've seen some of them in the city recently, they're spending a large amount of money and potentially can spend a lot more. We've got a very good reputation for dealing with the super yacht industry. They currently contribute something like $30 million to the Auckland economy. In the downtown framework document, we presented 4 possible outcomes for dealing with the congestion in that water space area. You've seen that. You endorsed the framework, and this was encapsulated in it. Not trying to solve the problem, but identifying that there was one that we needed to consider. Won't talk any more about the options in that form. We did look at what options would be, included those 4, but there were more. The key assessment criteria was it had to be compatible with the waterfront and downtown aspirations. By that it means it's got to be the front door to the city. It's not a backdoor operation. This is really the excitement centre of the city. People coming in want to understand that Auckland's a beautiful place. We wanted to do something that enabled transformation. So it isn't just about moving the chairs around a little bit. This is really about understanding what the big drivers are to get us to the next place. Accommodates growth. We're talking about growth. It's huge. 50% in 10 years is big. Operationally safe and efficient. There is an opportunity to improve on both of those. Not to say that the waterfront has any safety issues at the moment. It's an extremely well-managed environment. But as the various sectors grow, then that'll become more challenged. We need to make sure that it continues to be a very safe environment. It also needs to be as efficient as it can be. And all of that's great, but we need to know that we can deliver these things and that there is a financial plan that enables that to occur. It's part of where we're going with all of this. So we looked briefly at 6 broad options. We looked at a whole lot more, but we came down to 6 that we put some time into. And Madam Chair, I can go through these in some detail if you wish, or we can move to the preferred option. How would you prefer we deal with this?
I think just a brief explanation of each option would be useful.
Okay, the first option that we see up there on the board, option 1, we call the Queen's Wharf extension. Now, this sounds like it's all hinging around cruise. Cruise is one element of what's considered, but to be fair, it's the big player in how we have to handle growth and infrastructure. So the first option was looking at an extension to Queen's Wharf to allow for larger cruise vessels. Current cruise vessels are sort of in the 250 metre long range. Large new vessels that are being built now are 300 300 and 350 metres long. We need to be able to accommodate 350 metres long. So you see one there on the eastern side of Queen's Wharf, Queen's Wharf is there. Golly, it's moving around. And Queen's Wharf is there on that one. So in addition to that, we need to be able to accommodate 2 more cruise vessels. So we're making provision for 3 cruise vessels, 2 of which will be large, and we're assuming that the third one will be of smaller dimension. So the second cruise liner in the, oh, it's going through the jug, that's why we're getting fuzzy lines. The, thought it was me, golly.
Don't make a hole in it.
The second cruise liners on Princes, where you see Princes, often see cruise liners now. That's a challenge because that terminal there is very constrained. I don't know if you've been there when there have been people embarking and disembarking, but it's certainly suboptimal, and by international standards it certainly is. And the third vessel is on the western side of Queen's Wharf, which is there, which is, how many things in the way? There. Princess Wharf would need a wharf extension to allow for the longer vessels, and that, if I can point to it there, and there, and Queen's Wharf would also need an extension. Option 2, which we've called the Admiralty Basin Ferry Terminal, takes ferries out of the current ferry terminal basin, which is between Queen's and Princes, between Queen and Princes. That allows 2 large cruise liners to go into that basin without congestion. However, it does put pressure on Princes Wharf facilities, and also would require facilities on the western side of Queen's Wharf. Currently they're on the eastern side, Shed 10. Smaller vessels would go on the eastern side, which is also on Queen's Wharf. To be able to do that, ferries need to be relocated into the Admiralty Basin area, which is there and there. And the proposition around that is that Captain Cook Wharf would be either rebuilt or repurposed to be suitable for ferries. A considerable amount of work to make that happen. Basically, it's a new structure. Option 3 is the Bledisloe Wharf extension, and primarily what is proposed in this option is that cruise liners would use the western side of Bledisloe. There would need to be some wharf extension or accommodation of some nature to allow that to occur. Under that scenario, the Captain Cook Wharf would still be used as an operational port area. So you have, and Queen's Wharf would be available for public use, but would also have the ferry operations there as well. Under that scenario, there's still a third vessel on Prince's Wharf, a third cruise vessel. Option 4, Captain Cook extension, and the proposal in this instance is that there would be a new purpose-built cruise terminal on Captain Cook, which is there, and Captain Cook, which is there. Where am I? Oh, sorry, wrong one. There. Okay. So there would be a cruise liner on either side of Captain Cook. Marsden Wharf would need to be removed, and to enable sufficient manoeuvring room for those larger vessels, and also to allow for cargo vessels to operate more efficiently in the port area as well. But that would be a consequence of this option. Captain Cook would be extended in the order of 100 plus metres, yet to be determined precisely what that length would be. Queen's Wharf returns to public use, and there would be still a third vessel on Prince's Wharf, but it would be a smaller cruise liner, and the facilities are well able to cater for that size of cruise liner. The fifth option was a variation on the Bledisloe Wharf extension theme, which, without going into a lot of detail, had one cruise liner at the base of Bledisloe. There it is there. A second cruise liner still using Queen's Wharf in the fashion that they do currently, and the third vessel on, smaller vessel on Prince's Wharf. Sorry, there's a lot of options here and a lot of complexity, but it's important to work through them. And the last option considered was an extension of Prince's Wharf. So Prince's Wharf, which is to the left of the central wharves, the main central wharves, would be extended to allow for large cruise vessels, the 350 metre vessels. There would need to be an improvement of the the passenger facilities and provisioning areas. There is still the proposal to have a second cruise liner on the eastern side of Queen's Wharf, and the third cruise liner would be on the western side of Prince's. So if you can follow all of that, that's good.
And no reclamation.
That option doesn't have an impact on the port operations. So, Madam Chair, they were the options that were considered. We came to a shortlist, which was an extension on Queen's Wharf, the use of Bledisloe Wharf with 2 cruise vessels adjacent to the to Bledisloe, and option 4 was Captain Cook. So, Madam Chair, we spent a lot of time looking at developing an evaluation matrix. This is a summary of that, but it was a long piece of work teasing out just exactly what the benefits of each of those options would be. And long story short, the preferred outcome, which was a unanimous decision, was the option 4, which is an extension of Captain Cook Wharf. And there it is there. We've described that previously, but that's generally speaking what the option would be. So, Madam Chair, that enables easy legibility of the allocation and the provision of public spaces. So we haven't talked much about the land side, but in a minute we will. Extensive public space opportunity and potential for new facilities. Queen's Wharf for public use priority. 12 end loading ferry berths. So that would be the optimal long-term preference for ferries. Obviously there's a transition because we have a fleet that can't do that. Over time they would transition to end load ferries. Tourism vessel consolidation into a tourism hub. 3 cruise berths, 2 of them able to take longer vessels, 350 metre vessels. Replacement of the freight berth, in other words, removing the freight activities of Queen's Wharf and putting them in a more compatible place with Captain Cook. Leisure boat and super yacht growth. So we haven't talked much about the west of Prince's, but there's also in every one of these plans is a common element of providing for leisure boat and super yacht growth as well. There's a note on this plan here that says the port operational area, which is lost because of the removal of Marsden and the repurposing of Captain Cook, would require a replacement of that area within the port area to ensure that the port operating area didn't have a net loss of available work area. Within the public realm, so we're talking a lot about what happens on the water side. The reality is the impacts on the land side for that option are huge as well. So there's an improvement and excuse me, significant addition of public open space by the removal of the red fence barrier. So from 250 metres to 500 linear metres of wharf access. We've undertaken a public survey to determine what people are looking for in private open spaces. That's happened over the last couple of months. There was something like 1,200 responses. Very positive to redeveloping the public open spaces along the waterfront area, and a big indication around what people are looking for. Maybe that's a conversation we could have in more detail at another time. The replacement of Queen Elizabeth Square, and that was always predicated in the development of the open spaces on the waterfront area. By taking crews and putting them on Captain Cook, it means that we now have the opportunity to repurpose Queen's Wharf in a way that events have more certainty about their location. So there's large events like the World Masters Games need something like 2 years longer to plan where they're going to be and what they're going to require. The cruise industry, however, have a 12-month horizon for planning their visits. So there's a lack of ability to coordinate use across some of these important spaces, which means that the events team have no confidence in the availability of Queen's Wharf. So putting Queen's Wharf back into having ability to be there for events is very important. The other things we can look at there, heritage and culture. Look, there's a huge opportunity to give Auckland its uniqueness. It's not just another city, it's not just another port. Bringing out its Maori and Pacific significance is a huge opportunity for us as a maritime nation, really.